An interesting exercise is to use volume effects, technically called volumetric lighting, to generate a scatter effect, similar to seeing dust particles in a cone of light. The effect can be applied to point, spot, directional, and solar lights. What I'm going to do, and I'd like you to work along with me, is to add 4 simple pot lights to the ceiling of our room and apply the volume effects to those. So I need a drawing of a pot light, and this is going to be very, very simple. I'm going to use the cylinder solid to draw the rim of my pot light, and that's all I'm going to draw. So, top orientation, and I'm going to make this a 4-inch diameter solid. So I need 2 for the radius. That's my radius, and the depth I'm going to make just 1/4 inch. So 0.25. That will sit attached to the underside of the ceiling. Now I need to add a spotlight to that. So if we go to the light manager, and I want to place a light, it will be a spotlight. And we can do some pre-selections here. So we'll pre-select with a 60-watt bulb. I'm going to change the cone angle at the same time. I'm going to make that 25 degrees. Don't want a big spread of these lights. Everything else will change later on. Now I'm going to attach it. Now I need to attach the light just below the underside of this solid. Don't want the light sitting in the middle of the solid. That really doesn't work very well. So I just have to be a little careful about where I'm putting it. So I'm going to zip in here. Now look at my snap points here. It says cone. I move up a little bit. That says cone as well. What I'm getting here is the top surface and the bottom surface of the cylinder. So what I want to do is go down to the bottom surface of the cylinder, then make sure the compass stays there. So I'm going to use the O key again to make sure the compass stays there. Change the orientation to vertical and drop down by 1/4 inch. Now that's the previous dimension I used, so previous dimension will work fine. I can just data point. That places the light. Now I can direct the light vertically downwards. And there's my light in place. Now let's do a quick check to make sure that's exactly where I want it. Do a rotate. And yes, the light is 1/4 inch below the underside of the solid. Now, before I copy this to the ceiling and make 3 copies of it, I need to make the changes to the light first. So I'm going to select the light, which is this one, and make the changes. But before I do, I'm going to turn off this directional light before I forget. Don't want light coming through the windows. So that turns off. I select my spotlight. Now I can make my settings. Details. The cone angle is 25 degrees. I set that previously. Everything else is fine. Volume effects. Turn that on. Then we can set the colors and the various settings. I'm setting a fairly decent yellow color. We want to actually see a slight difference in color for the scattering. Now, height. This is technically the height of the cone of light, and I'm going to set that at 6 feet. I don't particularly want the cone to extend all the way to the floor. Scattering and density are values for the density of the scattering, and I'm going to set those at values round about 20 in each case. Don't want a super thick scatter. Attenuation at 50% means that 50% of the light will be attenuating down the depth of the cone, but I'm going to change that down to about 10%. Don't want a light shift because that simply means that the scattering effect will be shifted in color because of its angles. Don't need that. So everything seems to be in order, so I can now get rid of that. And now I can copy my light to my room. So let's make a selection set. First, I'm going to move it, and I need to select the top of my solid ring. So again, we'll look at the snap points that are available to me. That's the spotlight. Don't want that one. Move up. That'll be the bottom of the cone, and that will be the top of the cone or the top of the solid ring. That's the one I want. So we'll data point on that to accept that point. I'm going to go across to this corner here, which places me on the underside of the ceiling. Now, I don't want to leave it there. I'm going to put my compass there. So, compass goes there, top orientation. And now I move this out into the room itself. Easier way to do that, we'll go to the top view. And here comes my light. It was here. Now I'm moving it over to here. place the first light about there. Leave that one there. It's selected, so I'm going to make a copy of that. Drop that down, say, to about there. Now I'm going to make a selection set of both of those and copy that over to there. Good. Now I've got 4 spotlights and the pot symbols in place. That can go. Let's scoot back to my internal view. Place a fence in. Don't want to see too much of the ceiling, but I want to see the floor. Good. And we'll render. I'm going to use interior better for this, I think. Okay, off we go, rendering. There, we're done. Now you see the effect. Quite nice. I think perhaps that the scattering is too dense, and I would go back and change the density and the scattering value to much lower values, probably around 5. And that will thin out the scattering effect and let me see the elements behind the scattering. But you see how this works. Also notice that I'm seeing reflections in the floor, which is probably okay. This is a wood floor and probably fairly reflective. You can see the pseudo pot lights in the ceiling, which are attached to the ceiling itself. So that works out very nicely. So experiment a little bit, change some of those values, do some more rendering, see what different effects you can create.